Russian dictator Putin knows exactly how to play with Donald Trump's ego, and he has been doing it for years. This warning comes from Fiona Hill, a former White House advisor and one of the leading U.S. experts on Russia. She spoke about it in the Independent's podcast, World of Trouble. Hill says the Russian dictator uses flattery and small jokes to influence Trump and to protect his own goals, including keeping the war in Ukraine going. She attended many of their meetings during Trump's first term, and she says Putin often mocked Trump right in front of him, hiding it behind the language barrier Trump never noticed. Hill shares one moment from the G20 summit in Osaka in 2019. Putin and Trump were talking about nuclear missiles and bragging about their support for Israel. Trump said Israelis even named things after him because of Jerusalem and the new U.S. embassy. Then the dictator couldn't resist. Donald Trump, maybe they should name the whole country after you, Putin joked. Everyone at the table understood it was sarcasm, except Trump. Hill says the translators softened Putin's real words, so Trump didn't hear the mockery. He even answered seriously, "Oh no, that would be a bit too much." Hill also remembers seeing John Bolton, Trump's national security advisor at the time, trying not to laugh as he realized what was happening. According to Hill, Putin still believes flattery is the fastest way to influence Trump, and she insists the dictator has no intention of stopping the war in Ukraine. His economy, his politics, and his personal power depend on the war continuing. Another former Trump advisor, John Bolton, recently said that Trump's team is pushing for a quick end of the war, even if it means forcing Ukraine into a bad deal with the Kremlin. Turkey has reacted to the latest explosions in the Black Sea, saying it is concerned about two commercial tankers that were struck inside the exclusive economic zone. But while Ankara calls for calm, the real story is what happened at sea and what it means for Russia. Late on November 28, Ukraine hit two Russian Shadow Fleet tankers, Kairos and Virat, just off the Turkish coast. These are the ships Moscow uses to evade Western sanctions and move oil in secret. Both vessels were empty and heading for Novorossiysk for loading when they were struck. Ukrainian security officials say the attack was carried out with Sea Baby naval drones developed and produced inside Ukraine. And SBU officials told the Associated Press the tankers suffered major damage and were effectively knocked out of service. A video shared with journalists appears to show the drones hitting the ships in quick succession. Turkey says the explosion created risks for shipping and the environment, but for Ukraine, this operation is part of a wider strategy to pressure Russia's war economy at its weakest point, its oil export. By striking the Shadow Fleet far from the front line, Kyiv is showing that Russia cannot hide its resources anywhere in the Black Sea. And as the Ukrainian intelligence puts it, the aim is simple: to limit the Kremlin's financial ability to wage war against Ukraine. Large-scale military exercises are kicking off in Finland, bringing together British troops, Finnish border units, and around 600 reservists. The operation, called Northern X-25, involves roughly 3,000 personnel and around 600 pieces of equipment, including Leopard 2 tanks, helicopters, and drones. It's one of the largest winter combat drills held in northern Finland in recent years. The exercises are designed to train forces in defensive, offensive, and concealed combat operations under harsh Arctic conditions. According to Brigadier General Ari Laaksonen, who is leading the drills, the goal is to sharpen readiness and strengthen cooperation with NATO allies. He said the presence of the British unit further improves interoperability between partner forces. For Finland's conscripts, these drills are the final major field exercise before they complete their service in December and move into the reserve. At the same time, reservists are training both in provincial combat tasks and in various headquarters roles. A Russian victory in Ukraine would cost Europe twice as much as helping Ukraine win. That's the conclusion of a new study from Kurisk and the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. And its message for Europe is obvious. Researchers looked at two futures: In the first, Russia keeps advancing, forces a political deal on Kyiv, and gains real influence over Ukraine's direction. Ukraine could lose up to half its territory, fall into long-term instability, and millions more Ukrainians, between 6 and 11 million, could flee to Europe. The bill for Europe under this scenario would be enormous, between 1.2 and 1.6 trillion euros over 4 years. That includes refugee support, social strain, and a huge new defense spending to protect NATO's eastern flank from the Baltics to the Arctic, because a victorious Russia wouldn't stop in Ukraine. The second scenario is completely different, a Ukrainian victory. If Europe provides the weapons to Ukraine needs, tanks, artillery, drones, air defense, long-range missiles, Ukraine could stop Russian advances, retake occupied areas, and force Moscow into real negotiations that protect Ukraine's core interests. This scenario costs Europe far less, 522 to 838 billion euros over 4 years, roughly half the price of a Russian victory. And if frozen Russian assets are used, the cost could drop even more. A Ukrainian victory would also bring stability back to the region, refugees returning home, faster EU integration, and lower political and economic risks. The study warns that Europe will soon carry most of the burden, as US support is expected to decline. That's why the EU is now working on a major reparations loan, backed by 140 billion euros in frozen Russian central bank assets, with a decision expected in December. So backing Ukraine is not only the cheaper option, it's the safer one for Europe's future. Make money, not war. That's the real message behind a new investigation by the Wall Street Journal. And it reveals how far the Kremlin went to seduce Donald Trump's inner circle, not with peace, but with profit. According to the article, Kremlin envoy Kirill Dmitriev held several rounds of talks with Trump's special representative Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Officially, these meetings were about ending the war in Ukraine, but in reality, sources say they quickly turned into a sales pitch about the benefits of doing business with Russia. Dmitriev spoke openly about how the US sought lift Russia's economy after a ceasefire, with American companies getting priority over European ones. He even pushed an idea that $300 billion in frozen Russian assets in Europe could be used for American-Russian investment projects and a US-led reconstruction of Ukraine. He offered more: joint mining of rare minerals in the Arctic, cooperation in energy, and even a US-Russia mission to Mars with SpaceX. The message was simple: there is money to be made if America sees Russia as an opportunity, not as a threat. Western security officials told to the Wall Street Journal this was a carefully prepared Kremlin strategy for Trump's second term. The goal: bypass the US national security system and convince Trump team that borders matter less than business. And according to journalist sources, the pitch worked. Witkoff and Kushner, both businessmen, were reportedly enthusiastic. Witkoff even told the Wall Street Journal directly Russia has huge resources and huge territory, and talked hopefully about a future US-Russia-Ukraine partnership where everyone prospers. Meanwhile, European intelligence agencies were alarmed. Ahead of the planned Putin-Trump meeting in Alaska in August, they quietly briefed European leaders about the economic deals being discussed. The details from Arctic minerals to reopening energy projects shocked them. There is no evidence that Witkoff, Kushner, or the White House knew that all the other covert contacts. But the pattern is clear. Moscow wasn't offering peace. It was offering profit while still expecting the war in Ukraine to drag on. The resignation of Andriy Yermak has triggered a strong wave of emotions across Ukraine. For many, the news felt like the beginning of long-awaited accountability, especially after anti-corruption investigators searched his residence. People describe the moment as a sign that even the most influential figures are no longer untouchable. Others reacted with a caution. Ukraine is entering a sensitive phase of negotiations with the United States, And there are real concerns about disruption, instability, and the lack of experienced managers ready to step in during wartime. The mood is mixed: relief, frustration, and uncertainty all at once. But one sentiment is shared widely. Ukrainians want honesty, consequences, and a clean system, no matter how high the investigations go. Here are two reactions that reflect the public mood.
There is no trust in this person. What is happening on the front lines, what corruption is happening in the state at all levels of government. And who is he? It is completely unknown where Yermak came from and what he did before this position.
You know, on the one hand, I think it's definitely a good thing that some kind of purge is being carried out and leaders are being investigated. But on the other hand, I think it's difficult to find a truly effective manager, because I know that there aren't enough professional and effective personnel in Ukraine right now. But I'm sure there are decent people and good managers out there.
That's all from me for now. If you want more clear and honest updates, subscribe and stay with us.